Trump is flirting with a 50-year mortgage, still doubling down on over 500,000 Chinese student visas. What in the world is going on here? Plus, Americans have their faith declining. What's up with that? The whole Jeffrey Epstein saga just continues. All of that, plus our weekly Hammer Time on today's episode of The Josh Hammer Show. Well, as you know from listening to the show, it's still the economy stupid. That is our working thesis on the show in the aftermath of the Democrat victories in the off-year elections in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia just about a week and a half ago. It is still the economy stupid. Jimmy Carville had it right. I don't say that often, but he had it right back in 92 when he was Bill Clinton's campaign manager and chief strategist, and now it still is the economy stupid. Now, give the Trump administration credit where credit is due, certainly. He's thinking about affordability and some of the very real economic concerns that are very much in front of younger millennials and Gen Z in particular. When you think about the economic plight of younger millennials and Gen Z, what you see based on the data is that they are achieving all of the historic milestones of living and achieving the American dream. Younger Americans say are hitting all of those milestones, literally each and every one, on a more delayed later schedule. So they are getting married at a later age. They are having their first child at a later age. They are purchasing their first home at a later age, and on it goes. And the increase, the generational rise in home prices makes a lot of sense when you consider that for Gen X and probably to an even greater extent for the baby boomers, home ownership and real estate was one of the primary ways of realizing and achieving the American dream. You would buy a house, your house would appreciate in value on some fluctuating timeline over the course of years or likely decades. You would pass that house down to your children if you were so lucky to have a family and pay off your mortgage and all that there. But overall, the reliability of the escalating home value was one of the ways that an entire generation or more of Americans were able to achieve the American dream. That makes the situation today quite a paradox, because the paradox is that the younger generations now, who have seen generally stagnant wages and still too stubbornly high inflation and just more generally an affordability crisis, are having a harder time buying those homes that have escalated in value for decades and decades due to Gen X and baby boomers using it as something of an investment. So cue the President of the United States coming in with this idea of a 50-year mortgage. So the way this works is, or the way that this came about, is that Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social account a few days ago, earlier this week, that FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was the chief architect of the 30-year mortgage. Apparently this was put into his head by someone in the administration, and now he wants to be the king of the 50-year mortgage. This is all courtesy, as I said, of someone in the administration, Bill Pulte, who is the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, someone whose reputation is somewhat mixed across the board. He's also the guy, by the way, who has credibly accused Lisa Cook of the Federal Reserve of committing mortgage fraud. That actually looks very legitimate there, so good for Bill Pulte on that one. I'm not so sure about this one. A 50-year mortgage, really? I mean, really, is that really the salvo? Is that really the panacea to our housing crisis right now? I mean, for what it's worth, here is President Trump trying to defend this 50-year mortgage proposal. Go ahead and watch this.
Your housing director has proposed something that has enraged your MAGA friends, which is this 50-year mortgage idea. So a significant MAGA backlash, calling it a giveaway to the banks and simply prolonging the time it would take for Americans to own a home outright. Is that really a good idea?
It's not even a big deal. I mean, you go from 40 to 50 years, and what it means is 50, you pay something less from 30. That some people had a 40, and then now they have a 50. All it means is you pay less per month. You pay it over a longer period of time. It's not like a big factor. It might help a little bit. But the problem was that Biden did this. He increased the interest rates, and I have a lousy Fed person who's going to be gone in a few months, fortunately. I have a guy too late, Jerome Powell, we call him too late. He was too late in everything, except when it came to before the, the so-called Democrat election, which didn't work. But we're going to get interest rates down.
Okay, so on the one hand, it's not necessarily the biggest deal. He's right about this. On the one hand, it's not a huge deal to offer another option. On the other hand, by offering an option, you are thereby legitimizing it and incentivizing some people to do it. So what are the actual numbers? What are the actual downside of a 50-year mortgage. So the total interest on a 50-year loan, and let's kind of use a very baseline number. Let's say you have a $400,000 home. So this is Realtor.com did this whole analysis. You have a $400,000 home with a 6.25% interest rate and a 10% down payment, okay? Let's use that as an example. Total interest on the 50-year loan, based on what I just said, total interest would amount to almost $1 million, $816,396, compared to the 30-year mortgage, which would be $438,000, $438,156. So it's just under double the total number of interest payments based on that example I read you from a 30-year to 50-year. So on the one hand, Trump is kind of sort of right that if you really genuinely believe in free choice and that there's no downsides, but there actually are a lot of downsides of free choice, kind of capping that aside for now. If you really believe that, okay, fine. I mean, you're offering another suggestion, but the downside is that you're literally going to have people be more enslaved to debt. Okay, I mean, at a time when consumer spending is really declining because too many people are behind on the credit card payments. There, 67% of Americans, give or take, roughly 2/3, are living paycheck to paycheck. Is this really the time to try to incentivize more people to just get more hooked on debt, to just have more massive interest payments over the course of decades and decades? I'm not entirely sure that this is the big solution to America's housing predicament. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a very, very real problem. Trust me, I am a millennial. I live in South Florida. It is a really, really, really overpriced home market here. No one knows this situation more so than I do. My wife and I are very much on the home purchasing market. It's really quite a problem there, and I think that there are any number of solutions that can be considered there. I'm just not sure that this is it, guys. This seems to me to be basically a sop to the banker lobby. Okay, to the banker lobby when it comes to just more interest, more debt. Who benefits there? It's not really the consumer. I mean, what are the odds anyone who's actually going to live long enough to take out pay down a 50-year mortgage? I mean, what does it even look like? Let's say you're 35 years old. I'm 36. Let's say you're 35 years old. You're purchasing a home for the first time. You're going to finally achieve the American dream and pay off the bank when you're 85? What? I mean, it's just kind of silly. It's just really kind of silly. I mean, is it even a good thing for anyone to commit to that particular home for 50 years? I mean, can we predict anything about 50 years? Do we know what our community, what our state's going to look like there? I mean, there's just a lot wrong with this picture there. So I really, really am deeply sympathetic to the president's concerns about the housing market. Again, I see this, I experience it, I live this personally, I very much here in South Florida there. I'm just not sure this is the answer. This is part of a broader pattern, though, by the way, of Donald Trump kind of just tossing out these proposals. He does this as something of a trial balloon. So, for instance, we saw that earlier, that exchange between Donald Trump and Laura Ingraham on Fox News earlier this week. Well, it was actually on the same interview, the Trump-Laura Ingraham interview earlier this week, where Trump doubled down on a separate trial balloon. 600,000 Chinese student visas. What? I'm sorry, what is the purported America First case for letting in 600,000 people from America's arch geopolitical foe and having them come in here on a student visa? Square that circle for me. It makes no sense whatsoever. A shockingly high percentage of my college classmates, I graduated college in 2011, a shockingly high percentage were Chinese nationals. Where did they all go after they graduated? Back to China. They took what they learned, they went back to China. To do what? To build out the economy and the sciences and maybe the military goods and the weaponry and the this and that and that for our arch political rival. What could possibly go wrong? It's a ludicrous idea. The far better proposal, if you really want to go full MAGA America first, is to severely curtail our student visas. Frankly, I'm actually very open to the notion that we currently shouldn't have any foreign student visas at all when it comes to higher education. We ought to just focus on educating Americans. Boy, what a novel idea. When you think about the fact that the entire purpose, the raison d'etre of American higher education is to inculcate Republican habits of mind and civics and virtue, and ultimately trying to raise the next generation of Americans to be loyal and leaders and faithful and all that when it comes to their family, their community, their country, and ultimately to God Almighty. Really, I mean, focus on that. Crazy stuff. I don't know what he's thinking on this one. It really makes no sense there. Crazy stuff. Trump also talking about H-1B visas again. Here he was also talking about H-1B visas on Fox News.
We have plenty of talented people
you
here.
don't. No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have. You don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, "I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles," or "I'm going to put."
How did we ever do it before?
Well,
I'll
give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea that made batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing. It's very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you and I disagree on this. You can't just say a country's coming in, going to invest $10 billion to build a plant, and going to take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
All right, so he's wrong on this too, but he's less egregiously wrong. The student visa thing is just, I like literally like mind-blowingly just counterproductive and counter MAGA first. The problem with the H-1B visas is that if you actually look at the percentage of H-1B visas that are doled out, a shockingly high percentage, literally by far an outright majority, not even a plurality, go to one country and one country, India. It's basically just a total sop to India. Now, I'm not saying that we should end all immigration from India necessarily. There, I happen to favor a short-term immigration moratorium in general. Call it for 3 to 5 years, whatever there. But I'm just saying that there's a structural problem with H-1B, which is that there is one country that, for various reasons, when it comes to lobbying and so forth, has really just gone to the center of this there. And there's all sorts of other problems, morally speaking, when it comes to H-1B visas. You're trying to encourage or incentivize American corporations to hire foreigners over Americans there. I mean, come on. This is not the hill to die on right now. Your mandate, Mr. President, and more on this a little later in the show, but your mandate at this moment, if it's still the economy stupid, is to focus on making the lives of American citizens better day to day. Some immigration over the mid to long term can do that. I would submit, though, that after 60 years of largely unfettered immigration since the Immigration Nationality Act, aka Hart-Sellers, the old Ted Kennedy bill back in 1965, after 60 years of that, I'm not entirely sure that more mass immigration right now, especially given the country of India's control over the H-1B system. I'm not frankly entirely sure that is the answer. So keep on trying when it comes to economic solutions, but I think that the head's in the right place. The policy proposals right now, the policy wonkery, frankly, could use something of an adjustment. Something else that could also use a bit of an adjustment. This is a headline that just leapt off the page to me. There's a new Gallup poll when it comes to religion in America. It's really quite depressing stuff. Just 49% of Americans, according to Gallup, say that religion matters to their daily lives. This is down 17% from just 10 years ago. So in 2015, that number was 66%. Now it's 49%. It is the first time that fewer than half of American adults have given this answer in annual Gallup surveys going back to 2007. It's a pretty shocking number, to be honest with you. Now, the U.S. still, this is the silver lining here, the U.S. is still a lot more religious than the rest of the OECD, the rest of the industrialized world, first world economies. That 49% number can be contrasted to the 36% of people in all the OECD, that is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. 36% of people in all the OECD countries combined say that religion matters in their lives. But still, what America, which has always been, and technically still relatively is, a more religious country today, this is historically low stuff when it comes to 49%. There's all sorts of reasons for this, and there's all sorts of reasons for thinking that we really have to turn the ship around if we really want to get to the root of so many of our current moral, social, and civilizational crises. Now, there was something of an initial decline in faith for some Americans after World War II. after what was then the war to end all wars, obviously the Holocaust and all the various atrocities of that. There was something of an initial very mild decline, but it really has not started accelerating until recent decades. There, specifically within the Catholic Church, there was something of an initial decline in Catholic religious participation rates around the time of the Catholic Church scandal, about 15, 20 years ago or so. But that doesn't really count for this current data either, because this is really accelerating just over the past 10 years. And the basic take for this is that way too many people, prominently on the left, but including many people on the right as well, have simply substituted something else for their religion. They have decided that the actual important things in life, God, church and synagogue, family, the afterlife, the notion of the permanent, the imminent, the transcendental, they decided that these things are actually not what matter. What really matters is what you see on your social media feed or what you see on cable news. What matters more is to shut down your MAGA or your woke left neighbor and to not be friends with that neighbor. This is not what built this country, though. And if this country is going to endure, if it's going to come back, if we're going to uphold Benjamin Franklin's promise to that doctor in Philadelphia in 1787, and this is going to be a republic if you can keep it, then we're going to have to fulfill, ultimately, what John Adams, Benjamin Franklin's colleague at the time, famously said. John Adams famously said that this Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for any other. Well, what does it say when fewer than half Americans say that that moral and religious framework is actually relevant to their lives? So start with the micro. I will say this. This is not a preachy show, so to speak, but I will say this. Poll after poll shows, every poll that's ever been taken on this shows that people who take religion seriously and really devote meaningful time to their house of worship, to studying scripture and holy texts, to being involved in the religious community, they are happier. They are more content. They believe in purpose and meaning, and in afterlife, resurrection of the dead, all these core concepts of the biblical religions, Judaism and Christianity. On a macro level, America is a healthier place in virtually every way when we have a more morally imbued, indeed outright religious body politic. I wrote my syndicated column on Friday about our sports gambling epidemic. And yes, it is an epidemic. Virtually every statistic out there shows that vulnerable young men are disproportionately now carrying over credit card debt from month to month there. They're missing payments there. They're getting behind on mortgages, all the above. And sports gambling has a massive problem on this. Whether it's this country's infamous drug overdose epidemic, especially with fentanyl in recent years there. Our pornography epidemic when it comes to the general crisis of young men and young women not dating, not forming families, and not having kids. Is there a problem out there that is not better solved on a macro level by having more people be more religious? I have been saying for my entire adult lifetime that if I could just snap my fingers and do one thing, and that would be my closest thing to a one-stop shop panacea in order to turn around this very slowly sinking ship so that America really can be the nation that, once again, lifts all tides and raises all people to be that one shining city on a hill. There's one thing I could do, it would be making people more religious. That is the one thing that I would love to see happen. We have a lot of work to do, clearly. This is really distressing stuff from the Gallup pollsters. And we will see who takes it seriously. I would love to see someone like a J.D. Vance maybe give like a solemn address on this at a prominent church. There's a lot that can be done when it comes to civic leaders, lay leaders, religious leaders there. But keep your eye on this. This is a deeply, deeply distressing thing. It is also foreign. It is anathema to the American political tradition. And it's something that we're really, really, really going to have to turn the ship around if we want to make America what America ought to be, what America can be, and what America was founded upon. So we're not going to lose a story. We will keep on coming back to this story, certainly, as necessary. The news of the week otherwise. And I have chosen to not focus a lot on this for the very simple reason that it is just not the story that I am most passionate about. But we're not going to avoid it at this point. Jeffrey Epstein and all of that is back in the news. So what happened in July, if we go back about 4 months ago, is you had the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, as well as Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, among others, who released this fairly terse page-and-a-half memo that effectively disclaimed the existence, the entire notion of a so-called Epstein Files dossier. Yeah, even though Pam Bondi herself had actually said that in a Fox News interview back in February. Not entirely sure how to square that circle either. So back in July, they said that this doesn't really exist, and therefore there's really nothing further that can be done. And there were a lot of people on the right at that time who were completely apoplectic about it. There definitely were a lot of very ambitious, very cynical, very hypocritical Democrats who were deeply upset about it as well. But a lot of folks on the right were really, really upset about it. And the issue now is back in the news because you had this leak from Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. Initially, it was 3 emails. Then it ends up being 20,000 documents, give or take. Came out just earlier this week. More Jeffrey Epstein. And they're saying that some of these emails show that Donald Trump was in touch with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, we knew that already. We literally knew that Donald Trump was in touch with Jeffrey Epstein. How do we know that? Because there's a million photos of it. It's not surprising. What we also know, and Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said this on Thursday, what we also know is that Donald Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, like literally terminating his membership when the then rumors became corroborated that he was involved in all sorts of horrific, loathsome, detestable, scum of the earth, sordid activities pertaining to underage girls. And look, here's the thing. The acts here are so reprehensible that I understand fully, and I agree that we would all love to see justice for victims. But the activities in question happened also a long time ago. There were a lot of questions swirling as to who might have taken some sort of settlement behind closed doors, who is choosing not to speak for this and that reason, of the victims, that is, of the girls. There's all sorts of other statute of limitations problems as well. Personally speaking, when I remember watching Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and all of them on the campaign trail, Stephen Miller, Kash Patel, whoever it was, I don't remember exactly who said what at what time, but the whole campaign, I remember watching, it was mostly the president, seeing them on the campaign trail, talking about how we're going to release the Epstein files. And immediately I was skeptical. I was skeptical for multiple reasons. On the one hand, I was skeptical because on a very literal basis, as a lawyer, I know that there is no such thing as like a single compendium of Epstein files. That's just not how it works. Okay? There was an investigation of Jeffrey Epstein in Palm Beach County, Florida, back during the Bush administration after Alex Acosta, the local U.S. attorney under the Bush DOJ, handed it off to the local prosecutor. There were a lot of questions about that, neither here nor there for present purposes. So there were documents from that, and then there were all sorts of other documents from when the DOJ actually did take over the case, like a decade or so later, like much, much further on. So there's not a single compendium here. And the way this works is that there was just never a chance. I'm sorry to tell you, there was never a chance, ever, that all of these documents were ever going to see the light of day. Why? Because there are rules about that. We have well-established rules of criminal procedure in this country, and among those rules of criminal procedure is that grand jury testimony and grand jury conduct doesn't get public. There are dispensations, there are exceptions. They are extremely, extremely rare. It is really, really hard to convince a judge to unseal and to publicly release grand jury testimony. There are very good reasons, for the most part, to keep that sort of stuff private. So I was frustrated back in July. Admittedly, the Trump administration, this has not been their finest hour. It's actually probably been their worst hour, honestly. They have not handled this well. And what Trump really ought to do, I said this in July, I'll say it again now, what he really ought to do is to just very forthrightly acknowledge this has not been the administration's finest hour and just level with the American people. Just explain what happened here. Explain how when Pam Bondi was on Fox back in February, how she said that the files were on her desk, then that gets you to the Bondi Kash Patel page-and-a-half memo in July, where it's been publicly speculated and reported in Source that Dan Bongino himself, the deputy director to cash the FBI, was not happy about it. Just tell us what happened. I think people just want to actually know what happened. It's really that. Now, some of that desire is probably a little more salacious, but a lot of that desire is coming from a good faith place of just wanting to actually see who was involved with this horrific individual and just trying to get some sort of justice for the victims. By the way, the notion that the Congress right now and the Trump administration has not been involved with actually releasing anything pertaining to Epstein is actually just not accurate. Here's Speaker Mike Johnson talking about that.
So we're going to put that on the floor for a full vote next week as soon as we get back. In the meantime, I'll remind everybody the Oversight Committee has been working around the clock, even through the government shutdown, for maximum transparency and full disclosure, as we have all been for since the very beginning. There's now, by my count, I think it's around 50,000 pages of documents that have been released. There was another big tranche that came out today, another 20,000 pages. They have combed through the Epstein estate files, which I'll remind everyone was not even anticipated in the discharge petition, and that's been a treasure trove, because included in that was Epstein's own personal financial ledgers, his travel logs, and his daily calendar, and all sorts of other things. So that's going to continue. The subpoenas are being complied with, and more are on the way.
All right, so there's a lot of folks saying that Republicans are involved in a cover-up. Well, I mean, you hear Mike Johnson there. There's no cover-up. Trump should level with the American people, and this broader distraction should end. There are a lot of folks, a lot of activists, a lot of the folks who are really online, who are diehard MAGA, who show up to the big Trump rallies on the campaign trail. Those are the folks who are really, really, really riled up over this. Those are the folks who Marjorie Taylor Greene, the utter dimwit, those are the folks that she, in theory, is thinking about, to the extent that she's thinking at all, when she's essentially flipping two middle fingers to the President of the United States and going along for this ride. Okay. The median Trump supporter, the average Trump supporter, has the Epstein files probably somewhere between 40th and 50th, if that, in terms of their most important issue that they actually care about. It doesn't make the top 25. It literally does not. Inflation, affordability, cost of living, wages, jobs, immigration, crime, foreign policy. There's so many other things that most Americans think about. Not a horrific scandal that happened 2 decades ago. I don't mean to belittle it, like horrific crimes were committed, but it just is what it is. And this is going to have to move on. Unfortunately, it's going to be something that keeps on nipping at the administration. I think until that leveling process happens, I don't know why POTUS himself doesn't just do it. I mean, for what's worth, just on Friday in a brand new Truth Social post, here's what President Trump says, quote, "The Democrats are doing everything in their withering power to push the Epstein hoax again, despite the DOJ releasing 50,000 pages of documents in order to deflect from all their bad policies and losses, especially the shutdown embarrassment where their party is in total disarray and has no idea what to do. Some weak Republicans, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have fallen into their clutches because they are soft and foolish. Epstein was a Democrat, and he's the Democrats' problem, not the Republicans' problem. Ask Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, and Larry Summers about Epstein. They know all about him. Don't waste your time with Trump. I have a country to run." I basically agree with that, to be honest with you. I think that's basically right. It's pretty convenient, isn't it, that these new 20,000 pages with the useful idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie and so forth, it's pretty convenient that these 20,000 pages just came up a matter of days after Chuck Schumer's hilarious and epic capitulation and deeply, deeply idiotic self-own to end the shutdown. This is what they want. And I've been hesitant to even talk about it, frankly, because it plays into the whole Democrat agenda, the whole information operation to distract from the issues that matter there. But the sooner that Donald Trump can nip this thing in the bud by along the lines of what I said, the better. And God willing, at that point, we can finally really move on. And what does move on actually entail? By the way, just one final note, actually, before we do explain what moving on entails, it is worth noting that just on Friday, Donald Trump said that he is directing the DOJ to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's connections to former President Bill Clinton. This, according to new reporting that came out on Friday, just at Axios. So he put this on Truth Social, that he was directing the DOJ and our great patriots at the FBI to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton. Now, Bill Clinton, we know, was on the so-called Lolita Express, the disgustingly named Jeffrey Epstein private plane. Clinton was on that plane dozens of times. Now, there were some emails that came out this week that show that Clinton never actually made it to Epstein Island, which I think goes against what I and many others had thought. Maybe he actually didn't. At a bare minimum, he was on the island. But the fact that there were Democrats, I mean, hold aside the Marjorie Taylor Greene's world, the fact that there were Democrats that are so focused on this right now, but only about Trump, and they don't really care about Clinton, I mean, to me, that gives away the game. If you guys actually care about nailing the folks that were buddy-buddy, that were chummy-chummy with the most horrific pedophile child sex trafficker in modern American history, then you would get to the source. You would talk not just about Donald J. Trump. You would talk about Bill Clinton, about all the other folks that Trump rattled off there on that Truth Social post that I just read. Why are they not doing it? Well, the thing speaks for itself, frankly, doesn't it? God willing, this thing moves on, because I view it as such a distraction, and there are so many other things that the American people, frankly, are thirsting for when it comes to this administration. And those things that they are thirsting for are the economic issues. To bring us back to our conversation much earlier about the 50-year mortgage, when it comes to affordability, when it comes to cost of living, when it comes to healthcare. You know, I was filling in on radio earlier this week, and I interviewed Congressman Brandon Gill of Texas' 26th Congressional District. Wonderful young congressman, been a personal friend for years, 31 years old, total stalwart, very precocious. Highly encourage you to follow his work. And in our conversation, Congressman Gill teased that the House Republican caucus would have, potentially as soon as this coming week, but we'll see, this week, the next week, sometime soon, they will have some really concrete public policy legislative details when it comes to trying to make healthcare more affordable and more easily accessible for more Americans. That is a very, very good idea. Republicans have not had a major healthcare plan literally forever. Like, actually forever. I couldn't even tell you. I mean, talking about expanding health savings accounts doesn't count. That's not a plan. It's not. You need more than that. So some sort of plan that's not like a one-stop shop, top-down Obamacare-style federal takeover, you don't want that either. But some sort of concrete way to make Americans think that you really care about their health care, that's a really, really good idea. So let's see what Republicans have in store for that. Better ideas than a 50-year mortgage to talk about our affordability housing crisis. That would be a really, really good idea as well. How about inflation more generally speaking? Well, the most recent data is that the month-over-month inflation per the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is hovering at right about 3%. That's a heck of a lot better than the Biden administration, which saw a peak of 9.1% and had a 4-year average of roughly 5%. So that 3% number is much better. It is still high, though. It is still higher than the Federal Reserve's 2% target. There is work that has to be done on that. Are the tariffs having an inflationary effect? Reasonable minds can vary on that. But I did see that Trump was considering getting rid of tariffs when it comes to certain food products, foodstuffs, consumer goods, things like beef, for instance, there. I'm not frankly entirely sure why we need tariffs on a thing like beef in the first place. To me, the most important reason that you have a thing like a tariff or any kind of protectionist policy is that you have an industry that it is vital, not just as a political giveaway to a certain lobby or interest group, but it is vital from a communal, common good, national security perspective. It is vital that that industry take place, the manufacturing and the supply chain be either right here in the good old US of A or in our close allies. So it's either reshoring or ally shoring. A thing like semiconductors, computer chips. That is the purpose of strategic tariffs, of reshoring. So just kind of throwing tariffs willy-nilly at a lot of products and then kind of making it up as you go along, so to speak, when it comes to then trying to take various tariffs off of products to try to appease people that just have their prices go up there. So you're basically then appeasing the people who own the cattle, who have the beef. Then you're appeasing the folks at the supermarket who are paying too much for the beef there. I mean, this is the problem when you start to get a little too hands-on when it comes to the economy. So the tariff stuff might be mildly inflationary at times there, but it's also at times probably should just be reined back a little bit in total, especially given the fact that there was so much uncertainty currently at the U.S. Supreme Court about the very legality of these tariffs. There's a very real chance. In fact, if I had to handicap it, I'd say there's probably a 70 to 75% chance that the Trump tariff program is actually going to fail at the U.S. Supreme Court. So it's probably time like now to start planning for that contingency, because you don't want to have yet another major backlash, yet another potential dip in the market, another consumer backlash when it comes to the tariff policy at that time. That would be, frankly, no good for anyone. So long story short, let's nip this Epstein stuff in the bud, level with us, have a direct address, talk to us what happened, and for the love of God, can we please all move on to the issues that really matter to the American people, and then get back to all the things we're talking about here on the show when it comes to the economy: affordability, cost of living, jobs, wages, etc., etc., etc. So let's now go to our weekly Hammer Time segment, where we go through the woke headlines of the week and we review the week that was. Insane stuff over at The Wrap, this website, reporting that the podcasting industry has a diversity problem. 64% of hosts are male, 77% are white. This is all according to a study from USC, the University of Southern California. And they are presenting this as being some sort of a problem. Of the top podcasts, 64% were men, 77% of the hosts were white. There is a severe lack of diversity in the podcasting medium in general. And the answer to this quote-unquote problem is a very, very simple answer. Who gives a crap? Literally, who cares? If the person is a talented broadcaster, a talented podcaster, if they have good and valuable information, if they have a perspective and opinions and facts and commentary, if they're a wellspring of knowledge, if they're encouraging you to be a better person, to take your life into your own hands, to go to church, to marry, to have children, if there's good advice, if there's good commentary, if there's an accurate analysis of America's current political contretemps, then who the heck cares whether the person is male or female, black, white, brown, red, yellow? Who cares? I mean, like, what a world where we have headlines like this. The race obsession is deeply unhealthy. There is nothing good down the rabbit hole of race obsession. Everyone over the course of history who has been race obsessed has been either a failure at best or evil at worst. The slaveholding antebellum South was race obsessed. The Jim Crow South was race obsessed. The Nazi Germans were race obsessed. Is there a single example? Literally, name one. Is there a single example? Email me if you have an idea. j.hammer@newsweek.com. Email me, literally. Is there a single example of one society that has been obsessed with race, or close to as obsessed as America in the post-George Floyd Black Lives Matter eras? Is there one country that was ever as obsessed with race as we are right now and has been better off for it? I submit to you the answer is all but assuredly not, but I welcome your feedback. j.hammer@newsweek.com. Meanwhile, according to the Daily Mail, Disney is set to hire a white actress to star in its latest reboot after dumping DEI amid woke fury. So Disney is cutting back on its DEI-focused casting, more generally speaking, and they've agreed to hire a white actress for their latest live-action reboot. This is happening as Disney has faced all sorts of criticism in recent years, including but hardly limited to the criticism they got from our governor here in the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis. You likely recall that whole battle that went on for at least a year and a half, 2 years or so, between the state of Florida and the Walt Disney Company, a battle, incidentally, that was basically won by the state of Florida. Disney ends up capitulating there. Again, to continue the same theme that we were talking about with the ridiculous podcasting story or non-story, as the case may be, Disney should just hire whoever is the best. What a novel concept. You're casting for a TV show or a movie, cast the best person for the show. Is that so much to ask for? Really? This stuff is, this is like low IQ dimwit mind rot. Like the mind reels at how stupid, frankly, for lack of a better term, you have to be so obsessed with casting certain races or ethnicities or religions or whatever for certain roles. Okay, you want to cast a wife in a film? Yeah, probably a good idea to cast a woman. You want to cast a husband or a king or a prince or some manly role? Yeah, get a dude. Beyond that, May the best man win. May the best woman win. It really, really, really ought not to be a heck of a lot more complicated than that, I would submit. But anyway, better late than never for the Walt Disney Company, which has been feeling the heat, and good for you, the consumer, for making them feel the heat. That's one of our leitmotifs here on the Josh Hammer Show, is make them feel the heat. The companies respond more often than you realize. Finally, courtesy of the wonderful publication City Journal, a product of the Manhattan Institute, Ohio State University, or really as it's known to the Buckeye fans, the Ohio State University, how could I possibly forget that? The Ohio State University has a new activist hiring program. So they've abandoned their DEI initiative, but they have onboarded some new left-wing professors. This according to some reporting from John Saylor over at City Journal. So long story short, Ohio State has, on the one hand, they have ditched DEI officially, but this is a very common story. There is still a lot of this diversity hiring that is kind of happening under the surface. And it's still a problem years after they formally ditched it because of just how deeply the ideology was embedded at Ohio State. The long story short here is that this stuff is illegal. Whether you think it's a good idea, it is now illegal. It's always been illegal, to be clear, but now it is deemed illegal by the Trump administration according to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as the Harvard affirmative action case at the Supreme Court 2.5 years ago. It's illegal. It's under the Civil Rights Act. It's unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. So you can't do it. You cannot put a thumb on the scale when it comes to race, when it comes to DEI hiring. You just can't do it. Okay, so Ohio State can learn this the easy way, or they can learn this the hard way there. Ohio, by the way, is a red state these days. Once upon a time, Ohio was like the swing state. It is a red state. So the governor, the legislature, really, you guys should seriously kind of take closer reins of your university, your flagship university, much the same way that we in Florida have done when it comes to our universities here as well. Well, thank you, as always, for watching and listening. I'm Josh Hammer, and this was today's episode of The Josh Hammer Show.